to A Rare Reality, a podcast powered by Jordan's Guardian Angels. I'm Christina Janes, Director of Outreach and Awareness for JGA. And today we're so lucky. We are joined by one of our true heroes, one of our true guardian angels. Nancy Churlo is here today to talk to us all about her brother, Frank. If you are a member of JGA, you know Nancy, you love her, and you've heard Frank's story, but maybe not in depth. So Nancy, we are going to get it all out there today. And thank you. Thank you for spending some time with me.
Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it. My brother, when we were kids, was just my brother. I never really thought of him as special. We played together. Oh, I did realize though, let's just go back a little bit. I did realize though, early on that, he had problems learning. My mother would try to teach him what he learned in school and he could never get his homework. And I would be sitting under the dining room table giving him all the answers because I just wanted him to hurry up and we can go out and play, But I never noticed that there was anything wrong. But, my mother would always say, she would pay a little bit more attention to him than me. Okay, does Frankie have this? And does Frankie have that? And I'm like, hey, what about me?
As siblings do, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's normal.
And I didn't know why she was, she paid a little bit more attention to him than she did to me. But we played outside together. We had the same friends in the neighborhood and I rode bikes and so did he. And so when did I realize maybe that there was something different? I guess, by the time he was in the fourth grade and he really wasn't learning like the rest of us. I knew more than he did. And I was 2.5 years younger. And as far as, academics. And so I guess maybe at that point I realized, wow, maybe there's something a little bit different about him. But really, really not as a child. He was just my brother. And I didn't know. I didn't have their siblings. So what did I know? This is how everybody's brother is.
It was just normal. It was what you knew. Tell me a little bit about who he was and how he was. I mean, talking about his personality and what was he like?
Okay, so as a child, so like I said, we played with the kids in the neighborhood, but like when he met new people, he was shy.
Yeah.
Until like I interacted and he saw that it was comfortable, and then he would join in and interact also. What else can I say about this normal childhood that I thought we had?
Yeah.
Really. But yeah, he had one special friend that lived across the street. Thank God for him. They always played together.
Yeah.
They would sometimes join the group of the other boys on the block, but not always, Yeah.
You just thought he was Frank.
He was just he was Frankie.
Yeah.
Frankie.
So,
He's just my brother. That's it.
So let's back up because I think that's what I wanted to get to was that you knew Frankie as Frankie, and come to find out many years later, and we're going to get through, how you got here, but many years later, you come to find out that Frankie has Jordan syndrome. And
oh boy, yeah,
it was, it was finally an answer. And that's why this is important to our community, and to other communities as a whole. First and foremost, that the diagnosis came later, after he passed, but you now have an answer, which many people don't have an answer to some of these things. And so to know that that did happen is incredible, but also what happened after the fact. You donated his brain to scientific research to understand more about Jordan's syndrome, because he is truly the oldest known person to have Jordan syndrome. Now, it's pretty incredible because for our families, that's really something. He lived this long and full life, and then did more after his passing to give back. I mean, it's a remarkable story. That's why we're here today. That's all that we want to discuss. There's so much.
Yes. So my brother actually donated his brain to Parkinson's research because he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So after he passed, they had this Columbia Presbyterian called me and they said, we have this symposium, and what this is that we collect several brains, and when we get a collection, then we share all this information, all this knowledge that we've gained. She said, but not in your brother's case. Your brother's different, she said, and we're just going to have a symposium on his donation. I'm like, wow, okay. I said, so can I come? So she said, oh, nobody ever asked before if they could. I said, well, while you're asking, can I bring my family?
Yeah.
So, well, I'll ask and I'll get back to you. And she said yes. And so we went, and it was interesting. There was probably 30 to 40 doctors or fellows or the mix in the room. And they shared his whole life story and all his medical history and all the medications that he took, and everything was correct, And so then the man that did the autopsy came forward, and he presented the slideshow, and he said everything looked normal, normal, normal. They started to argue amongst each other, and he said, look, he said, I've done this for, I don't even know how long. He said over 10,000. I've done over 10,000 autopsies. He said, and I've never once seen this. He said, this man never had Parkinson's disease. So everybody was like, wowed. So, okay. So I don't know. Somehow this meeting ended. When the meeting ended, there was a woman that approached me, and she came from Wendy Chung's office, the genetics office. And she
Sure.
said to me, look, she said, would you be willing to give me your brother's brain so that maybe I could figure out what might have been wrong with your brother? I said, absolutely. I've been
Yeah.
searching and searching for years, and we tried everything and we did everything. And at this point, when they said this, he didn't have Parkinson's disease, it's like, oh my God,
Now what?
I felt like I let
Yeah.
him down. I did everything that I could do or knew how to do. And I reached out to everyone in every community everywhere. And I still didn't get him what he needed. So yes, absolutely. Please do
Yeah.
that. Right.
Please take it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
18 months went by, and they finally called me and they said, we know what was wrong with your brother. I said, you do? I said, well, do I have what my brother had? They said, no. They said, so I said, well, what was wrong with my brother? They said, well, you know what? You need to come here to New York and talk to the geneticist, who is Wendy Chung,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and we'll explain what this is to you. So she did. She said, and I think at that point they only had about 40 children. They
Right.
only had about 40 people around the world that had this.
Hmm.
So I said to her, I said, wow, I said, how did I do? I said, my brother made it to 60 years.
Hmm.
She said, yeah. She said, we don't have anybody that made it that long yet.
No.
So she said, if you would give me his brain, she said, I might be able to pinpoint the location of this mutation. And if I can gain that knowledge, she said, maybe I can not just cure this, maybe I could also cure Alzheimer's and cancer. And so I said, absolutely. She said, can I have his brain? I said, yes, you can have his.
Yes.
Of
You can
course.
have it today.
We never said no. He never said no. No matter what anybody suggested to him, Frank, do you want to try this? Do you want to try that? It was never no. It was always yes. He always wanted to have a better life. So I said yes. And then she said to me, she said, now that you said yes, I'd like to invite you to come with me to California and meet these people from around the world.
And then you met this crazy bunch, right?
Yeah. And oh my God, and life is, I mean, it's so wonderful to know that, for the group. It's so wonderful for the group, for them all to know that they're not alone, that there are other people out there that are doing the same thing. And what's so special about these people? My God, they've traveled around the world to get together so they could share this experience and to,
Yeah.
to help their children to
Yes.
find something
Well,
that
and
is
it's funny because
different.
we always say we'll go to the ends of the earth for our kids, right?
Yeah.
No matter
Yes.
what, you're going to do whatever it takes. Doesn't
But these
matter what it
people,
is, but we're
uh-huh.
really doing that. And I think that, and I've said this to our families before, that they're truly the heart and the soul of this project, because without them and without your family and your donation, and without our families coming from around the world to give data and move the research forward, there wouldn't be anything to go on. So to be able to do this, it takes, it is a group effort. I mean, it's
Yes.
incredible. But
Yes.
to do what you guys did with Frank and with his blessing, without that, I mean, the value of what was gained, the knowledge that was gained from that donation is incredible. And I think that's why our families are, they're just, I mean, they truly, truly, truly say you, Nancy, and Frank are their heroes, because without
Thank you.
you, this was, it's a window into something that they haven't seen, and something that Wendy hasn't been able to see yet, Dr. Chung. So I hope you know how much that you're appreciated.
Thank you. But you know what, too? Like I said, it didn't matter what anybody suggested. He always wanted to try something, and he would be so happy today to see that, like, you know, his effort going forward is going to help
Yeah.
so many kids, so many kids,
So we
and
talk we
adults as well, I
Yeah,
guess.
right. And that's the thing is that we talked at the conference about how we don't really know truly how many adults have Jordan syndrome that have been diagnosed with something else, misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed. We just don't
Right,
know at this point. But I think that Frank will help in that, and having this huge research point here, is going to be that'll be a big help no matter what.
right,
So
right.
it's a beautiful thing. Our families love hearing from you because you are able to give them even your story about your brother when you were growing up, going outside, riding bikes, going
It
to
was just
school,
normal, just
right?
normal. Yeah. We got on the school bus together when we went to Catholic school together. It was just what it was. And
So
there was,
childhood was normal, and you guys noticed that maybe there were some learning differences there,
yeah,
some things that he had to move through, and different ways of learning, correct?
right, right. So we went to Catholic school, like I told you. And by the time my brother was going to be promoted from the third grade to the fourth grade, um, my mother was really concerned because my brother couldn't read. He couldn't read three words that were put together. He couldn't add one and one. So my mother approached the teacher and said, "Look, this is going to be like the fourth time you're promoting him. He can't read, he can't add." So the teacher said, "You know what? You're just such a nice woman. You're always here. You're volunteering in the kitchen. You're volunteering in the playground." And back in the day, if your child had a learning disability, there was a lot of you could see mental retardation back in the day. It was
It's
a
different
shame. It
now.
was a
Yeah,
shameful thing, right?
yeah, yeah.
So she said to my mother, she said, "I didn't want to cause shame to your family. We don't want to cause shame to your family." Um, so we thought we would promote him, and so she said no. So they suggested at that point, well, we don't have services here in Catholic school, and so maybe take him over to public school where they have special education programs. And
Mm-hmm.
in the fourth grade, he did. He went to public school, and I don't know. When I think about it, I think, what, fourth grade is kind of late, right? Maybe to learn how to add or read, but
Right,
no,
right.
no, he was able to learn how to read, and he was able to learn how to do really simple math, really simple math. It was life skills more than um, what you're saying today, what you're seeing today, algebra, whatever, whatever. No, no, no. They taught him how to count his
Right.
money. Um, he would go to the supermarket or the store and get his snacks or whatever it might be, and they would say it's 12.95, and he knew that was close to $15. So he'd give them the $15. So he knew even if he got cheated, he didn't know whether he got cheated or not with the
Yeah,
change, but it
yeah.
was close enough. So that was enough. It was life skills, and he was
I was
able
gonna
to do
say it's
that.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, he was able to manage that. He was able to read the newspaper, and he was able to write notes, post-it notes all over the house, all little things. He had a sense of humor, and he would, you know, leave little things around the house, and you find them a few days later, and he thought it was. Um, so that was elementary school.
Yeah.
So he's 2.5 years older than I. He was 2.5 years older than me, but he graduated from high school just a year before me. So what was he really, a year and a half behind, which is not so bad.
Mm-mm.
He went to a vocational high school, and I don't know if people all know what that is, but it's a place where you learn different trades. So let's say
Mm-hmm.
you want to be a carpenter, or you want to work with metal, or you want to landscape, or you want to learn how to bake, or whatever it is. So
Right.
he was able to touch on all different kinds of things to figure out maybe what it is that he
You might
wants
want to
to.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. So he graduated from high school, and in the summer, so okay, so like I mean, his body functions were normal. He was quiet, um, but he was pleasant. So at the job, he would warm up to people, and then not be as talkative as me, of course, but able to get along and have lunch with the guys, and just
Yeah.
joke around. It's just for me,
Normal.
ordinary
Right.
guy. Okay,
Right.
so he gets out of high school. Now what's he going to do? So the town that we lived in had this like summer program working in the parks department. So my mother, thank God, my mother. Okay, my mother. My mother came from Europe in 1950 after World War II. She had to go to high school, night school, and learn how to speak English. And
Yeah.
my father really didn't learn as well as my mother did. Let's just say so. My mother was in charge of all these worldly things, and she's just a European immigrant that has an eighth grade education. But oh my God, what a brilliant woman! I mean, for her
Right.
for the time that she lived in, right? So anyway, so she found him this job at it was a summer program, and so it ended. The grant money ended, you know. So now what's he gonna do? So she found him this little job in some little factory putting parts together or something, and then they remembered him when they had a job opening in the city.
Yeah.
So they called and they said, "Oh, you know, we'd like to have him back because you know he was really uh, an obedient child." An excellent employee because it didn't matter what they said to him. Like,
He just
you
did
know,
it.
yeah, you know, he painted playground equipment and cut grass and shoveled snow. And, you know, if they said to him, you have to clean the bathrooms in the park, he didn't argue with them. He just cleaned the
Mhm.
bathrooms in the park, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
They remember that, thank goodness. And they called him back and he was able to work there for 25 years.
Wow.
So, but at the end of like his employment, okay, so he went to work. He would come home from work, and when he was about, you know, he was diagnosed at 38 years old with Parkinson's disease. But like probably when he was like 35 ish, I could see that things were not right.
Hmm.
He would come home from work and he would be well, he would be exhausted. Yeah, my mother would say,
Yeah.
well, you know, he worked outside in the sun all day, or you know, he was out there shoveling snow. He's really
Hmm.
tired, and you know, for a man of 35 years old, you know, you really shouldn't be. But that okay. So you know, he would when he was eating dinner, he wasn't able to bring his fork up to his mouth. He would put his head down to his dish
Got
and
it.
push the food in, you know. So I said, Mom, there's something wrong with him, you know. I said, maybe we should. I didn't even know why I
What it
suggested it.
was. Yeah.
You know, I said maybe we should see a neurologist. So you know what? My mother looked at me like, okay, this is the baby girl, and what does she know what she's talking about here? You know, because I think always when you have children, well, I don't, but I think maybe then they did. They looked at their children and said, "This is the little one, and what does she know?" You know.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, so we were going to have a family reunion. It was coming up in a week or so, and I called my mother's sister, and I said to my mother's sister, I said, you know, I said something's wrong with my brother. I said, I don't know what it is. And I suggested this to my mother, and she just doesn't want to hear it. And so maybe, you know, when we're together next week or whatever it might have been, I said, you can watch my brother. And this is what I see. And if you see what I see, can you please tell my mother that maybe we should take my brother to a neurologist? Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we come to the party and he gets out of the car and as he's walking to let's say just the table or wherever from the car to wherever he was going, he was staggering, and my one of my cousins came up to me and said to me, oh my God, you brought him here and he's drunk? I said, he's not drunk.
Oh,
I said,
no.
no, 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 something's wrong with him. So he's looking at me like, yeah, okay. So
You're like, no, really. Yeah.
yes,
Like,
what's wrong with him, you know? So my mother's sister, my aunt, she watched during the day. She watched him eat. She watched him walk, and so then after, you know, she called my mother later and said, you know what, maybe there's. She didn't say that I called in
mhm.
advance or anything. She just said, you know, I watched him, and you know, something's not right, Mary. You know, you got to try to maybe figure this out. And so
And Nancy, do you think it was like low muscle tone that it
yes, and we never
was?
knew. Well, you
Yeah.
know what? But while he worked really hard for as a laborer in the city where he worked,
Hmm.
um, you know, we never realized that. Like, you know,
Right.
family was big. My mother was one of nine. Somebody was always moving. He was always the first one there to help. So we never realized that. Maybe we didn't see that. We just didn't see that, right?
Yeah.
So,
So
so
back to your mother's sister.
yes. So okay. So I made an appointment, or somebody told me to see this neurologist in the town where they lived, and we went. And he said, "Oh yeah, it looks like Parkinson's disease." But he started him with something called Requip, and I was watching television commercials, and it was
Yeah.
like for restless leg syndrome. I'm like, what are they doing? You know, and like, what is
Right.
this? And then after a while, things started to progress a little bit, and I said, you know, maybe I'm going to take him out of this little tiny neighborhood network, and I'm going to take him to a larger hospital network. So I took him to Hackensack Hospital, where I saw this really young neurologist, less than 40 years old. And he looked at him and he says, "Yeah, it looks like Parkinson's disease, but it looks like something else. And I don't know what it is." So he said, "But I studied under this doctor at Columbia Presbyterian in New York," he said, "and his name is Paul Green." And he said, "If you go to see Paul Green, I'm pretty sure that he'll know what is wrong with your brother. So, of
Hmm.
course, I'm going to take him there because
Yeah.
we really don't live that far from there." So we take him there. And Dr. Green looked at him and he said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, he's got Parkinson's disease, and plus some, but he's got something else." So he called it Parkinson's plus. I don't know if there's ever is such a thing, but it's what he
Yeah.
said. It's Parkinson's plus, right? So he said, "When we get new patients, he said we always try to ask them if that, at their time of death, would they donate their brain for scientific research so that we can
Hmm.
make progress, and people can have better lives." And so my brother, he's like a 12, his mentality, he's like a 12-year-old. He never really progressed above that. So like I said, he can interact with his friends and his people, 12 year
Yeah.
olds can, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So so that was, he said that, and he gave us some paperwork, and I took the paperwork. And when we get in the car, he's like, what is this guy talking about? He wants my brain. I'm like, "Frank, he doesn't, he's just asking because how do you think science progresses? You have to have somebody step up and do this, otherwise people's lives would never get better. and,
Right.
and so oh my gosh, he was crying about it. I was crying about it too. We came home, we told my mother. My mother's like, "Frank, this is going on like for 2 weeks. He keeps talking about this for weeks." And my mother's like, "Frank," he said, "they don't want your brain when you're alive. They want your brain when you're
No.
not here anymore. Look," he said, "you're having a hard time living. Things are hard for you. If you do this, maybe someone will have a better life than you. You have
Yeah.
to think of it that way." So he finally signed the papers. And then we delivered him to the next uh, visit, and we just forgot about it.
Right.
Big
Right.
stickers with telephone numbers, and I put them everywhere, on the safe, on the back of the doors, everywhere that I could think of. That God forbid someday, because it's a really big deal to decide to do this, on the back of the kitchen cabinet. So, like, when you're in a tizzy because things are happening, right?
Yeah.
You want to know that you're going to be able to find this telephone number when you really need this telephone
Yeah. Yeah.
number.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was it. And so time goes on. We
So
continue to go to this neurologist in New York. I don't. You want to ask me something? Did you want to ask me something?
when so he's now on medication. Is it helping?
Oh yes. So okay. So we go to this Paul Green in New York, and he prescribes a different medication. He adds to the Requip. He keeps the Requip, and he adds to it. He gives him carbidopa, levodopa. He gives him Stalevo, and Stalevo, I think they told me, is something that like pushes the drug through the system. I'm not quite sure, but
Right.
he's
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
these, 1, 2, 3 different medications, and they help, right? Except there are periods of time where he freezes in his space. He cannot move at all. So one day, my brother's not living with us yet. They're not living. They're not living with us
Yeah.
yet. So
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh my God, something's wrong. Come here." So I come there, and he's sitting in the chair, and he cannot move. And I'm pacing in front of him and talking to him. He can't even follow me with his eyes. We don't know what this is. So I called 911. They took him to the local hospital instead of the new hospital that I'm affiliated with. No, well, actually, wait a minute. Let's just go backwards. I'm not even in New York yet. So they take him to the hospital. When I get there, they're evaluating him. He cannot move, and the man in the I guess the doctor in the emergency room said, after a while, he said, "I know what's wrong with your brother." I said, "What is it?" He said, "Yeah, he needs a psychiatric evaluation, and then maybe you should consider putting him in a nursing home." I'm like, "Oh God, no!"
That's a
Right?
lot. That is a
It,
lot.
it is a
Yes.
lot. So they admitted him that night to the hospital, and the nurse that was working that night was also the same nurse that was still there in the morning, and she saw him come in frozen. And so by the time the morning came around, she went into his room, and he's normal, right?
Fine. Yeah.
Yeah, he's moving, and he's talking to her, and he's got a sense of humor. He says to her, "Hey, put some frozen margaritas in that bag there." But when I came in, she said to me, "Listen to me." She said, "I saw him come in here frozen." She said, and I saw him this morning. She said, they have no idea what is wrong with him. Take him home and don't ever bring him here again. Okay. Because that's what they said to me. You take him and put him away. And I'm never going to do that to my brother. Right.
No.
Okay. So that's how so we end up in New York City. Now what are we doing? So we are on all this medication, but still he's freezing in the middle. So that was a problem. That was a problem for a long while. And I'll tell you when that changed for us. Okay, so that was still a problem. And then while we were there in New York, all right, so they moved. So eventually my family moved in, my mother, my father, my brother.
So you talked about this at the family conference where you decide that you're going to move, you and your husband have a conversation. You're going to move Frank in, right? Frank's coming in. At the same time, your parents are getting older. All of a sudden, now your parents are moving into.
Well, you know what? When this started, he was 38 years old, and this started to get real.
Yeah.
You know, we knew that we were going to take care of my brother, and we looked for probably a year for a house that's going to be able to accommodate him, because we knew with Parkinson's disease, eventually he's going to end up in a wheelchair. So this place has to be handicapped accessible. Plus we have to have a comfortable place to live too, you know?
Sure.
So we looked and we looked and we looked and we found nothing. So we came upon this tiny little house. My husband said, you want to buy this house? You like this neighborhood? I said, it's okay. You know, it's not my favorite, but it's okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to buy this house. We're going to rip this house down. We're going to start all over again. So we did. We ripped that house, this little house down, and the whole first floor is all handicapped accessible. I have the ramp that comes in. We have wide doorways, handicapped showers, and I have a chair lift so that he can come up here and be with us on holidays. And so it takes a year to build this house. So the house is built, and my mother is in her 80s. I don't even remember what 80 something, but my mother has to go down up. My brother is downstairs. Remember I told you that she gave him a downstairs apartment. So now he feels free and independent, and he's, you know, he's got his own place. And
he feels good about it. Yes.
Oh, it's wonderful. Life is great. Except my poor mother has to come downstairs 11 times a day, and make sure he takes his medication. And she's got heart failure.
Yeah.
No. So my husband said, oh, let's look around here. So let's look around here. He said, this house is built. It's plenty big enough. And you tell them all they should come. So they all came. My mother, my father, my brother, they all came.
I mean, bless you both. Because
bless my husband. Whose husband's going to do buddies,
I mean,
right?
You would hope, but it's a lot. You know, I mean, that's a.
So it is smaller from where they came from, because they, you know, my mother and father were on one floor, my brother was on the other floor, and my father said to my mother, you know, they moved in, we got all the furniture, everything that fits the right way, because, you know, it's smaller and whatever, but he's got everything new. And my mother said to my father, it's small. My father's smaller than what they had, right?
Yeah.
So my father said, it doesn't matter how small it is. It matters that we're together.
Oh. Isn't that the best?
So thank God that they came when they came,
yeah,
because he was able to get used to this as his home before they passed away, because they were everything to him, right?
Yeah. And what wonderful memories for all of you to have had that time together too.
Oh my God, I thank God all the time for that. My kids do too. It was like, oh my God, we are so lucky that we were able to spend the last of their lives with them.
Yes.
Every day.
Yes.
Oh gosh, here I go.
I know. I knew it was going to happen eventually.
Okay. So anyway, so they were not here very long. 3 months. My father fell down, broke his femur.
Oh.
So my husband works full time, and I am. I had a career, and my job was outsourced to India. And so then I had to rethink about I had 7 weeks vacation. So it was no problem. Whatever I needed to do for them, I had plenty of time to do everything I needed to do. Okay?
Yeah.
So now what am I going to do? Because I need time to take care of them, you know, to do all the doctoring. And so
sure,
I decided to become a substitute teacher. I worked when I wanted to, and when I couldn't, I didn't. And then eventually along the way, they offered me a job as a teacher's assistant. So today I still work with special ed kids in high school. Yeah. It's really special to me.
Oh, for sure. And I guarantee you're special to them too.
So anyway, so I was, when you get out, when you're in school, you get out of school at 3 o'clock ish, and you can still make it to the doctor's till 5 o'clock ish.
Yeah.
So that worked. Um, Along the way, we had an aide that quit because she said, I can't do this. She said, every day, take these people to the doctor. I said, well, what do you think I'm going to do? I have 3 of them, and we need to do
Yeah.
this. But anyway, so let's go. Where am I? I'm so lost in other
So
stories.
so Frank is living in there. He's living in your house,
Okay, so
and
my
how's he
father.
doing at this point?
Okay, so when he moves in, he's already disabled. He's not working anymore. He only drove when he moved here. He probably only drove for another year or so,
Mhm.
and then he wasn't able to drive anymore. Um, so Frank lived with me for 11 years before he passed away. Um, in my house with me for 11 years. So the last 5 years he was in a wheelchair. So
Mhm.
the 6 years, the 6 years were, he was slow. Oh, he had got it. First, he got a scooter so he could scoot around the neighborhood, and he got friendly with the 7-Eleven guy, and he went down there and he bought his lottery tickets all the time, and he was at Dunkin' Donuts in the morning and picked up the Chinese food. So on his scooter, he was independent.
Yeah, he probably
He
loved it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we wanted to buy in a neighborhood where he could get around
Hmm.
if he wanted to. So he was like, everybody saw him and everybody said hello, and so he was happy. He was happy
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So where are we going now? Where are we going now, Christina?
So now,
Now, what did
so
I miss along the
he's
way?
he's then he's how is he? So he's on the scooter. He's independent, and then
Yeah,
there comes a time where he does end up in a wheelchair, but he is of sound mind still, and able to.
always. Never,
Yeah.
never lost his cognitive ability. Okay. So
Yeah.
even though his speech was a little bit slower, maybe a little bit slurred, he was always aware of everything that was going on,
Yeah.
always.
And
Yeah.
I guess this is where the journals come in because I
Oh,
mean
so
he's
he wrote,
always had these, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. He started writing journals. Maybe he wrote journals at his house in Clifton too, but when he moved in here every single day, he wrote in his journal
Mhm.
something that happened during the day,
Yeah.
some things were funny, some things were sad, and as life went on, and he was not working, and there were no people around that were his age, and he become sad, and so he would write about that, and he would be angry at me because I would come home and I would ask him, I said, "Did you walk today?" No. Well, if you can't walk, then you need to stand up. You need to at least stand up for 10 minutes. All she does is yell at me. I had no idea. The aide, I would say to the aide too, you got to make sure that he stands up. We don't want him to lose his strength in his legs or his muscle tone or whatever you call this. I don't
Yeah.
know. So I would put the key in the door, and he would hear the key and he'd say, "Here she comes. Here's the boss." But anyway, we had no idea that there was low muscle tone. He had several surgeries along the way. Oh, the medication that he was taking made his toes curl. So
Mhm.
he was actually walking on the tips of his toes.
Ouch.
And
Yeah.
and he had a really high tolerance for pain. So he wouldn't even tell me that there was something wrong till it was so bad that we needed a doctor or a hospital.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Mostly more like a hospital. So we went to guess the neurologist told us that the medications that he was taking caused this.
Yeah.
So the foot doctor said, you know what, one infection was so bad, I had to take him to an infusion center for antibiotics for 70 days in a row. And then after that, the foot doctor said, you know what, let's just cut the tendons in his toes. So his toes will be flat and this won't happen again. And then his heel was up in the air. So let's just cut the tendon over there too, put his heel back on the ground.
Oh
Like I
my.
said, he's never said no. So we fixed that. I was going to say,
And all the while he's been writing about his experiences in these journals because I know for some of our families you brought them to San Francisco.
I brought
And
some, yes.
for some of our families that was like a window into the unknown, and to see that there was this ability to communicate, whether the speech wasn't there or his ability to get around wasn't there, he had an outlet and a way to communicate
Right,
that
right.
is so beautiful.
And so then he would draw like little cartoon sketches to go along with it. And
Yeah.
so as things got worse for him, you could see the difference in the handwriting, as the years went by.
Yeah.
Um, Also, what I only realized this when I started to read his journals, is that he was dyslexic, and nobody ever told us he was dyslexic. Maybe they didn't even know what dyslexia was.
Right.
So that also makes it harder to learn.
Yeah. We've
Um,
come a long way in the ability to figure out how people learn differently,
yeah,
across the board, depending on what it is that you're facing. But um, I think that it's incredible to hear that for all of his years, he never let anything stop him, and he never let
right.
anything stand in his way. He lived a very full life.
He did. He really did.
And that
You know, we
you touched on that it was difficult toward the end for him. You and I have discussed that it was hard for him, but he never gave up hope.
never. He watched all these things on television about Parkinson's disease, how
Mm-hmm.
people would get up and walk after they had this surgery, this deep brain stimulator.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I told you, we went to New York. We had the neurologist in New York, but my brother at some point said, "Did I tell you this already? I don't know
No,
what I told
keep
you already."
going. Keep going.
Okay.
Yes.
So one day he called me down. He said, "Look, I can't feel my fingers. They're numb." So we went to New York, and the doctor referred us to someone else, and they said, "Oh, that's just all Parkinson's related." And I'm like, "No, this is not Parkinson's related, because
Mm-hmm.
Parkinson's is such a slow progression, and he was fine yesterday, and today he doesn't feel his fingers." So I took him to a neurologist somebody suggested here in New Jersey, a neurosurgeon in New
Mm-hmm.
Jersey. And they did whatever they did, whatever kind of scan, and they said his cervical spine is collapsing. And the surgeon said, "I can't even let you go home, because if there's a little slip in there in this, he'll be paralyzed from the neck down. Never mind, what kind of
Yeah.
life is that going to be?" So they fixed that, and then he suggested, "You know what?" He said, "Why are you going to New York?" He said, "We have a neurologist right here in my practice. Why don't you see this woman? It's in New Jersey, and it's much easier to get to." So we said, "Okay." So we started seeing this woman, and this woman, we continued the same medications that we were prescribed in New York. She added, or she switched some things up, but not much, not so much. Oh, I got to hang
Mm-hmm.
up on my daughter. Let's see, how do I do that? End? Do I end?
Don't end me.
Declined,
There
right?
you
Just
go. Yeah.
okay. So she said, I've been watching for a while. She said, and maybe a deep brain stimulator would be
Helpful.
the answer to this,
Yeah.
right? So it's just not like you're going to give him a brain stimulator. He had to go through a psychiatric evaluation, talk to psychiatrists. They had to tell him that, this is what they're going to do to you. Do you explain it? I mean, do you understand? Yes, yes, yes. So they did. They did the deep brain stimulator, and nope, it didn't work. And actually, it's like wiring. They wire both half. It's two surgeries. They wire one half of your brain, then they wire the other half. And there's a
Yeah.
computer in your chest, and they adjust it remotely. And when they turned it on, oh my God, he collapsed. And he had to go to the bathroom. We were able to make it to the bathroom, and then we came back, and she's standing there, and she turned it on, and he just lost all his body functions.
Oh my gosh.
So that's absolutely. So guess what? So what? So he did this, right? So now we know that this will never work for our kids, right? We know this will never work for them, because Frank tried this, and this is not going to help. But the medications that he took, we feel, I mean, I saw that they did work for him. They made him move more smoothly. Oh, let's go back to the offs. Remember I told you how he would get frozen in his space?
Right.
Oh my gosh, all this regular medication, it was a lot, did not help with that. So this woman in New Jersey, this one that did the stimulator,
Yeah.
she said there's this new drug from a different country. I don't know what it is, what country, but anyway, she said it's an injectable. She said you inject him, whatever the dose was,
Yeah.
inject him, and he'll move much better. But it's only for 2 hours. It only works for 2 hours. After 2 hours, it's gone. Oh my God,
And
that was
do you
that
have
was
to
a
keep doing it then?
yes. So
Okay.
this was like a miracle. So I mean,
Yeah.
if we're home and we're doing nothing, and he's frozen in his space and he's watching television, it's fine. But maybe we have to go somewhere, or maybe you have to get up and walk to the
Do
table,
something.
or
Right,
do so.
right.
You have to, you can't just sit there always, you know. So the injectable drug, yes, you inject him, and then it's like a miracle. Like in 10 minutes, he's moving like me. It's like, oh, this is incredible. So you
Yeah.
could do that up to 5 times a day. When he was in rehab center, so every little thing that happened to him, he'd have to, you know, he went to the hospital. If he spent a
Right.
day in the hospital, 3 days in the 1 day in the hospital is 1 week in rehab. 3 days in the hospital is 3 weeks in rehab. You know, so when we went to the rehab centers, we had to take this drug with us and say, look, at if you want him to participate in this, you need to inject him.
Sure.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
you know. But they didn't get it. They didn't. You know, when you're in the hospital, they don't even give you medications on time. I had to write signs on the walls. This is the times. This has to be on time. Please
Right.
don't be late. You know. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
It's a lot, and it's a lot to remember, and it's a lot to have to count on other people when you're able to do it yourself, and you know that you're doing it well, and it's working
And
for him.
right, right, right. So, you know, well, we made, let's see, what else did I miss? I don't know what else I missed. When
I mean,
we
I
were
think
in,
you've
when
hit
we,
so many things that have been successful for him too, and things that haven't worked, and that you saw, didn't necessarily work for him. I know that our families ask a lot about what to expect, and it's hard to predict that for their children. Not only is it that's so far down the line for them, that science changes. Everybody's different, so
right,
what's good for one may not be good for another. Everybody's diagnosis is different in some way because not everybody has the same characteristics all the way through. There's
right.
variations on the theme, so it's hard to predict what will happen in the future. But I think that it helps
But
in telling them what your experience was.
right, but for him, when I think about his whole life, right? Let's just, even though he was not able to work anymore, um, for 55 years, things were, even with all the medications and all the doctoring and everything, things were okay. Things, all of that stuff becomes so normal to you.
Right,
All
right.
things, you know, it was just the last five that were, it's intensively hard.
Hmm.
But like, so if your children are 15, you know what, you have so many years ahead, and there's so much technology and research and all these things today that will hopefully help them so they never end up in that position. But 60 years for my brother was wonderful.
Oh,
It
it's a beautiful
was, it
thing.
was.
And he was lucky to have you as his sister. He was lucky
Thank
to
you.
have you and to be in his corner.
I feel lucky that I had him, because without him I wouldn't be here with you.
Right. And we're
Yeah.
so grateful to have you. I guess in closing, because I know that we tried to cover his life in a short amount of time, and it's hard to do that. But if you could tell our families one thing about Frank, what would that be?
What should I say? Okay. Can I just say the things that I used to think about a lot? Okay. I
Yes.
used to think, oh my gosh, you know, why would God put a person on this earth at the end, you know, at the end when things were really, really very difficult, to live this way, you know? And then I thought to myself, well, maybe it's not about him, just about him. Maybe it's about me. Maybe it's about, this is a lesson for me to learn on how to be more empathetic and more patient. You know, because you have to kind of sometimes put this in perspective, right? And maybe he was given to me to like be an example of like, um to be my brother's keeper, you know, because people these days don't really, I don't see it a lot, you know. I don't see it a lot.
Mhm.
Um, but I know for sure that he was given to me so that I could give him to you, so that he can make a difference. Oh my God, I know he's smiling about that, right?
Yes.
And what should I say about what message do I have?
Yeah, what's your
Uh,
message for our families? Because I know that they look to you in so many ways.
well, I know what this is. I know that this journey is hard at times. Um, but you know what? These families that I know are really special people that have gone to the ends of the earth to figure it out. So never give up, because maybe your children right now, they're too young to say whether they want to continue. Like my brother was never going to give up on himself. He always wanted to make sure that he could do everything he could to have the most normal life that he could have. So never give up on your kids. Your kids are have value, and they're here to pave the way so that other people can have a better life.
And we say it on a regular basis. Together, we really truly can change the world. And
Yes.
we're doing that one person at a time, one family at a time, one community at a time.
Yeah,
And by people like you and Frank who are brave, and like our families who are brave.
they are.
There's so much bravery in this group and so much strength. And um, every day, you just count your blessings to be around people who are so positive and so focused on a single goal. So I thank you. Thank you
And
for
I thank you. Thank
telling
you
his
for
story. And I mean, it's just the best. And thank you. We really can't thank you enough for all that you continue to do, and for being a part of all of this and coming to our crazy conferences and dancing
I'm
with our
so
kids.
I'm so happy to be part of this big family. I really am.
Yes. Well, you're at the center of it. So, Nancy, we love you. Thank you so
Love-
much.
Thank you.
And thanks for spending some time and telling the story. And for our families, if you want to hear other podcasts too, you can check them out on all the major podcast platforms. The video versions are on our website too, jordansguardianangels.org. You can check those out there. And this one will be living on all of those platforms as well, so that we can always hear your story, Nancy, and always keep you in our hearts and top of mind when we're moving through this process. So
Thank you. I
thank
look
you.
forward to seeing all of you again in person.
Yes, we certainly hope so, and probably sooner than we think. So,
Great.
all right.
Okay,
Thank you.
Christine. Thank you
Bye.
again.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.